Ava wasn't your typical art thief. She preferred the thrill of the heist to the actual art itself. Tonight's target: a small, unassuming gallery tucked away in a quiet corner of the city. The painting, a drab landscape titled Autumn Mist, seemed unremarkable. But Ava's source, a shady informant named Fingers Frankie, assured her it was worth a fortune, or at least, it concealed something that was. She moved with practiced ease, disabling the alarm system with a small device and slipping through the back entrance. The gallery was dimly lit, the air thick with the scent of old canvas and dust. Autumn Mist hung innocently on the far wall. Ava quickly swapped it with a near-identical fake she'd commissioned and vanished into the night. Back at her safe house, Ava examined the painting. It looked like any other landscape, painted with muted colors and a lack of skill. She was starting to think Fingers Frankie had ripped her off when she noticed something odd. A faint shimmer beneath the paint. Using a special solvent, she carefully removed the top layer, revealing another painting beneath. This one was different, a vibrant, almost otherworldly depiction of a celestial map. That's when the trouble started. A heavy knock echoed through her apartment. Ava knew, with a sinking feeling, that she had stolen the wrong painting from the wrong people. And they were already here to collect. The knocking grew louder, more insistent. Ava quickly hid the celestial map under a loose floorboard, hoping it would be enough to fool whoever was on the other side of the door. She grabbed a small, antique pistol from her bedside table, her heart pounding in her chest. "Who is it?" she called out, trying to sound more confident than she felt. A deep voice responded, "Open the door, Ava. We know you have it." Ava recognized the voice. It was Gregor, a notorious enforcer for a group known as the Collectors. They weren't interested in art for its beauty. They sought rare and powerful artifacts, and they were willing to do anything to get them. Fingers Frankie had set her up. Ava knew she couldn't reason with Gregor. He was a brute, loyal only to the Collectors and their mysterious leader. She needed to buy time. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, stalling. "I just bought this place." The door splintered as Gregor kicked it in, sending shards of wood flying across the room. He was a mountain of a man, his face scarred and his eyes cold. Two other Collectors, equally menacing, followed close behind. "Don't play coy with us, little thief," Gregor growled, his voice like gravel. "We know you took the painting, and we know what's hidden inside. Hand it over, and maybe we'll let you live." Ava raised her pistol, her hand shaking slightly. "Get out," she said, her voice trembling. "Get out now." Gregor chuckled, a sound that sent shivers down Ava's spine. "You think that toy gun is going to stop us?" He gestured to one of his men, who stepped forward and effortlessly disarmed Ava, snatching the pistol from her trembling hand. "Now, where is it?" Gregor asked, his eyes glinting with impatience. He grabbed Ava by the arm, his grip like a vice. "Don't make this difficult. We don't want to hurt you much." Ava knew she was outmatched. There was no escape. She reluctantly led them to the loose floorboard and revealed the hiding place. Gregor snatched the celestial map, his eyes widening slightly as he examined it. "Interesting," he murmured. "Much more valuable than we initially thought." He turned to his men. "Search the place. Make sure she hasn't hidden anything else." While the Collectors ransacked her apartment, Ava watched helplessly. She knew this was just the beginning. The Collectors wouldn't let her go after seeing the map. She was a loose end, a liability. As Gregor prepared to leave, he turned to Ava with a cold smile. "Thank you for your cooperation. Pity it had to end this way." He nodded to one of his men, who produced a roll of duct tape. Ava's eyes widened in terror as she realized what was about to happen. She struggled, but it was no use. The Collectors were too strong. Within moments, she was bound and gagged, her fate hanging precariously in the balance. The Collectors dragged her away, leaving her ransacked apartment behind. Meanwhile, across the city, Frank Martin, known in certain circles as the Transporter, lived a life of calculated precision. His apartment was sparse, meticulously organized, a reflection of his disciplined mind. He adhered to a strict code, Never changed the deal, no names, and never opened the package. He transported anything, anywhere, no questions asked. Tonight, however, Frank was breaking one of his rules. He was waiting. He had a gut feeling something was off. His contact, Fingers Frankie, was late. Frankie was usually punctual, bordering on annoying. Frank had a job for him, a simple delivery, but Frankie was nowhere to be found. Suddenly, Frank's secure phone rang, a device reserved only for emergencies. He answered, his voice terse. Martin. The voice on the other end was panicked, barely audible. Frank. It's Frankie. The collectors. Eva. The line crackled with static and then went dead. Frank swore under his breath. The collectors. He hadn't heard that name in years. A ghost from his past, a chapter he thought he'd closed. And Ava? The name sparked a flicker of something he hadn't felt in a long time, concern. He slammed the phone down, his mind racing. Ava was in trouble and the collectors were involved. He knew instinctively that he couldn't ignore this. His code was about to be broken, and he was about to dive headfirst into a world of danger he thought he'd left behind. This delivery was about to get personal. The name Ava echoed in Frank's mind, pulling at threads of a life he'd tried to bury deep. Ava was his younger sister. He hadn't seen her in nearly 10 years, not since he'd walked away from his old life, trying to protect her from the darkness that clung to him. He'd sent her money anonymously, ensuring she had a chance at a normal life, far away from the violence and betrayal that had consumed him. He remembered her as a bright, spirited girl, always getting into trouble, always needing him to bail her out. He'd taught her a few self-defense moves when she was younger, just in case, never imagining she'd end up in a situation like this. Frank paced his apartment, his mind working through the possibilities. The collectors were ruthless. They wouldn't hesitate to use Ava to get what they wanted. He had to find her, and fast. He pulled out a hidden compartment in his desk, revealing a collection of specialized tools. Lockpicks, surveillance equipment, and a silenced pistol. The tools of his former trade, the skills he thought he'd left behind. He knew getting involved meant risking everything, exposing himself to the very dangers he tried to shield Ava from. But he couldn't stand by and do nothing. He owed her. And deep down, he knew he'd never truly escape his past. It was time to embrace the transporter once more, to unleash the skills he'd honed in the shadows. His sister was in danger, and he was coming for her, one shattered jaw at a time. Frank knew he needed information, and fast. He started with the last person to contact him, Fingers Frankie. Even though the call had been cut short, it was a place to start. He remembered Frankie mentioning a dive bar he frequented, a dimly lit establishment called the Serpent's Kiss, known for its shady clientele and loose lips. He drove there in his sleek, black Audi, a vehicle as meticulously maintained as his apartment. The Serpent's Kiss reeked of stale beer and desperation. Frank scanned the room, his eyes missing nothing. He spotted a few familiar faces, low-level thugs he'd crossed paths with in the past. He approached the bar, signaling the bartender, a burly man with a shaved head and a wary gaze. "Frankie been around?" Frank asked, his voice low and menacing. The bartender hesitated, then wiped down the counter with a rag. "Haven't seen him, and I wouldn't know anything if I did." Frank slid a $100 bill across the counter. "Try again." The bartender's eyes flickered to the money, then back to Frank. "He was here earlier, looking nervous. Said he was in trouble with some art collectors. Then Gregor showed up with his boys. They took Frankie away." Frank's grip tightened on his glass. Gregor. The same name Ava's kidnappers used. He was definitely on the right track. Did Frankie say anything about a painting? Or a map? The bartender shook his head. "Just that he messed up. Big time. He pocketed the money. That's all I know. Now get out of here before you bring trouble down on us." Frank left the bar, his mind piecing together the puzzle. Frankie had set Ava up, and now they were both in the collector's clutches. He needed to find their headquarters, and he needed to do it quickly. Frank knew he couldn't just barge into the collector's headquarters guns blazing. He needed a plan, and that meant gathering intel. He reached out to an old contact. A tech was named Maria, who owed him a few favors. Maria was a master of surveillance, capable of hacking into almost any system. He met her at a nondescript coffee shop on the outskirts of the city. Maria, sporting bright pink hair and multiple piercings, was already hunched over her laptop, her fingers flying across the keyboard. "Collectors, huh?" she said without looking up. "Those guys are bad news. Old money, deep pockets, and a penchant for collecting things they shouldn't. They're like the Illuminati of art thieves." "Anything on their headquarters?" Frank asked, his voice urgent. Maria typed a few more commands. "It's tricky. They're good at staying off the grid. But I've got something. An old warehouse on the docks, registered to a shell corporation. It's heavily guarded, cameras everywhere, motion sensors, the works. They've also got some serious firepower inside." She showed Frank a satellite image of the warehouse. It was a sprawling complex, surrounded by a high fence and patrolled by armed guards. "Looks like they're expecting trouble," Maria said. "They're about to get it," Frank replied, his eyes hardening. He downloaded the information onto a thumb drive. "Thanks, Maria. You saved me a lot of time." "Just be careful, Frank," Maria said, her voice uncharacteristically serious. "Those guys don't play by the rules." Frank nodded, his mind already focused on the task ahead. He had a location, he had a target, and he had a sister to save. It was time to go to work. Before storming the warehouse, Frank needed more information about the collectors' operations, their security protocols, and, most importantly, Ava's location. Maria had identified a known safe house used by the collectors, a dilapidated apartment building on the south side of the city. It was a risk, but Frank needed to take it. He arrived at the building under the cover of darkness, his face obscured by a baseball cap. He moved with a silent grace, a predator stalking its prey. He disabled the security cameras with a small EMP device and picked the lock on the main door. Inside, the building was a maze of dark corridors and crumbling walls. Frank moved cautiously, his senses heightened, listening for any sign of activity. He found an unlocked door and slipped inside. The apartment was sparsely furnished, but it was clear it was being used as a temporary base of operations. Maps covered the walls, marked with various locations, and a radio crackled with coded messages. Suddenly, two collectors burst into the room, their weapons drawn. "What the hell?" one of them shouted. Frank reacted instantly. He disarmed the first collector with a swift kick to the wrist, sending his gun flying across the room. He then delivered a crushing blow to the other collector's jaw, sending him crashing to the floor. The fight was brutal and efficient. Frank used his superior training and tactical skills to quickly subdue both men, leaving them unconscious on the floor. He searched the apartment, finding a ledger detailing the collector's recent activities, including a reference to Ava and her current location. Cell Block D in the warehouse headquarters. He now had what he needed. It was time to go save his sister. In the cold, sterile confines of the collector's warehouse, Ava was enduring a living nightmare. She was strapped to a metal chair in a dimly lit room, the air thick with the smell of disinfectant and fear. Silas, the collector's leader, stood before her, his eyes like chips of ice. He was a man of refined tastes and chilling cruelty. "Miss Martin," Silas said, his voice smooth and controlled, "we know you know the significance of the celestial map. Tell us what it reveals, and this can all be over quickly." Ava glared at him, her jaw set. "I don't know what you're talking about," she lied, her voice hoarse. Silas sighed, a gesture of feigned disappointment. "Such a waste. Gregor, show her how persuasive we can be." Gregor stepped forward, a cruel smile spreading across his face. He held a pair of pliers in his hand. Ava's heart pounded in her chest. She braced herself for the pain. The interrogation was brutal. Gregor inflicted a series of agonizing injuries, each designed to break her spirit. But Ava refused to yield. She knew that the celestial map held a secret that the collectors desperately wanted, a secret that could be dangerous in the wrong hands. She couldn't let them have it. Despite the pain, Ava clung to the hope that Frank would come for her. She remembered the self-defense moves he'd taught her, the unwavering determination in his eyes. She knew, deep down, that he wouldn't abandon her. She had to hold on just a little longer. Silas watched the interrogation with a detached air, his expression unchanging. He was a patient man, willing to wait for Ava to break. He knew that everyone had a breaking point, and he was determined to find hers. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Flashback. A younger Frank, barely out of his teens, stood in a dimly lit boxing ring, sparring with a seasoned fighter. Ava, a scrappy 10-year-old with pigtails, watched from the sidelines, her eyes filled with admiration. Frank was her hero, her protector. Their parents were gone, victims of a senseless crime, leaving Frank as Ava's sole guardian. He worked tirelessly to provide for her, taking on odd jobs and even participating in underground fight clubs to make ends meet. One night, after a particularly brutal fight, Frank returned home battered and bruised. Ava, her eyes filled with concern, tended to his wounds. "Why do you do this, Frank?" she asked, her voice trembling. "It's dangerous." "I do it for you, Ava," Frank replied, his voice gentle. "I have to protect you. I won't let anything happen to you." He pulled out a small, antique compass, a family heirloom. "This compass belonged to our grandfather," he said. "He was an explorer, a man of adventure. He always said that the most important thing in life is to never give up, to always fight for what you believe in." He placed the compass in Ava's hand. "Remember this, Ava. No matter what happens, never give up. And always remember that I'll always be there for you." The flashback faded, returning to the present. Frank gripped the steering wheel of his Audi, his knuckles white. The memory of his promise to Ava fueled his determination. He wouldn't let her down. He was coming, and he was bringing hell with him. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Frank arrived back at his apartment, his mind already formulating a plan. He needed specialized equipment to breach the collector's warehouse, thermal imaging goggles to navigate the security systems, breaching charges to bypass the reinforced doors, and a high-powered rifle for long-range support. He reached out to another contact, a former black market arms dealer known as the Quartermaster. The Quartermaster was a shady character, but he always delivered. Frank arranged a meeting at a deserted construction site on the outskirts of the city. The Quartermaster arrived in a beat-up van, his face hidden behind a ski mask. He opened the back doors, revealing an arsenal of weapons and gadgets. "So, the transporter's back in business, eh?" he said, his voice muffled. "What can I get for you?" Frank quickly selected the equipment he needed, testing each item to ensure it was in perfect working order. He also requested a detailed schematic of the warehouse's security layout. "That'll cost you extra," the Quartermaster said, holding out his hand. Frank tossed him a bag filled with cash. "Consider it a bonus for keeping your mouth shut." With the equipment secured and the security schematics in hand, Frank returned to his apartment to finalize his plan. He studied the warehouse layout, identifying blind spots, security camera locations, and potential entry points. He meticulously planned his route, calculating every move, every contingency. He was a master strategist, and he wouldn't leave anything to chance. Ava's life depended on it. He was ready. It was time to unleash the transporter. As Frank drove towards the warehouse, he noticed a pair of headlights tailing him. He glanced in the rearview mirror and recognized the black SUV. It belonged to the collectors. They knew he was coming. He slammed his foot on the accelerator, the Audi's powerful engine roaring to life. The SUV sped up, attempting to cut him off. Frank swerved expertly, dodging the SUV and weaving through traffic. The chase was on. The collectors opened fire, bullets ricocheting off the Audi's reinforced chassis. Frank remained calm, his eyes focused on the road. He downshifted, expertly maneuvering the car through the narrow streets, using his driving skills to evade his pursuers. He reached a highway on-ramp and floored it, the Audi reaching breakneck speeds. The collectors kept pace, their SUV gaining ground. Frank knew he needed to lose them before he reached the warehouse. He spotted an opportunity, a construction site with a series of ramps and obstacles. He veered off the highway and onto the construction site, the Audi bouncing over the uneven terrain. The collectors followed, their SUV struggling to keep up. Frank used the construction site to his advantage, performing daring maneuvers, jumping ramps, and narrowly avoiding collisions. He finally managed to shake off the collectors, leaving them stranded amidst the chaos of the construction site. He continued towards the warehouse, his adrenaline pumping. He knew the collectors would be waiting for him, but he was ready. He had a sister to save, and he wouldn't let anything stand in his way. Frank arrived at the warehouse, the air thick with tension. He parked the Audi a safe distance away and donned his thermal imaging goggles. The warehouse was a fortress, surrounded by a high-security fence and patrolled by armed guards. He used the security schematics to identify a blind spot in the camera coverage and scaled the fence, his movements fluid and silent. He landed inside the perimeter and moved towards the warehouse, his senses on high alert. He used his breaching charges to blast through a reinforced steel door, creating a diversion. The alarms blared, and the guards swarmed towards the breach. Frank moved through the warehouse like a ghost, taking down guards with swift, precise strikes. He used the shadows to his advantage, ambushing his opponents and disarming them with brutal efficiency. The warehouse was filled with deadly traps, laser grids, pressure plates, and motion sensors. Frank navigated the traps with expert precision, using his knowledge of security systems to bypass them or disarm them altogether. He encountered heavy resistance, facing waves of armed guards who were determined to stop him. Frank fought with relentless ferocity, his skills honed by years of experience. He used a combination of martial arts, firearms, and tactical maneuvers to overcome his opponents. He was a one-man army, cutting a swathe through the collector's defenses. He was getting closer to Ava, and nothing was going to stop him. The chaos caused by Frank's breach provided Ava with the opportunity she needed. The guards in cell block D were distracted, their attention focused on the unfolding mayhem outside. She remembered the self-defense moves Frank had taught her, the pressure points, the quick strikes. Using a shard of broken glass she'd managed to conceal, she worked at the lock on her cell door, her fingers trembling. The lock finally clicked open. She slipped out of the cell, her body aching from the interrogation. She moved through the cell block, her steps faltering. She was injured, weak, and vulnerable. She knew she couldn't go far, but she had to try. She needed to find a way out of the warehouse to escape the collector's clutches. She stumbled upon a storage room, filled with crates and boxes. She ducked inside, hoping to find a place to hide. She rummaged through the crates, finding a first aid kit. She cleaned her wounds and bandaged them as best she could. As she was tending to her injuries, she heard voices approaching. The collectors were searching the cell block, their voices harsh and menacing. Ava held her breath, her heart pounding in her chest. She knew it was only a matter of time before they found her. She grabbed a heavy wrench from a nearby toolbox, her hands shaking. She was ready to fight, to defend herself, to do whatever it took to survive. She knew Frank was coming, but she couldn't rely on him. She had to save herself. Frank systematically cleared cell block D, his heart pounding with each step. He reached the storage room and cautiously opened the door, his weapon raised. He saw Ava, huddled in the corner, clutching a wrench. "Ava?" he said, his voice filled with relief. Ava looked up, her eyes widening in disbelief. "Frank!" They rushed towards each other, embracing tightly. "I knew you'd come," Ava said, her voice choked with emotion. "I told you I'd always be there for you," Frank replied, his grip tightening. Their reunion was short-lived. Silas, accompanied by Gregor and a squad of elite guards, appeared at the entrance to the storage room. "Well, well, well," Silas said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "A family reunion. How touching." He gestured to his guards. "Seize them." Frank pushed Ava behind him, his eyes fixed on Silas. "This doesn't have to end this way," Frank said. "Let her go, and I'll give you the map." Silas chuckled. "I already have the map. What I want is what it leads to." and I believe Miss Martin can be persuasive. He nodded to Gregor, who stepped forward, his eyes filled with menace. Frank knew he couldn't reason with Silas. He had to fight. "Get behind me, Ava," Frank said, his voice low and dangerous. "This is going to get messy." The battle was about to begin. The final showdown erupted in a flurry of violence. Frank charged towards Silas, engaging him in a brutal hand-to-hand fight. Silas was a skilled fighter himself, but Frank's years of experience and unwavering determination gave him the edge. Ava, remembering the self-defense moves Frank had taught her, used her cunning and agility to disable the remaining guards. She grabbed tools from the storage room, using them as improvised weapons. She tripped guards, kicked pressure points, and used her knowledge of the warehouse to her advantage. Frank and Silas exchanged blows, each strike landing with bone-crushing force. Frank dodged a knife thrust from Silas and countered with a series of rapid punches, sending Silas stumbling backward. Ava managed to disable most of the guards, but Gregor, towering over her, blocked her path. He grabbed her by the throat, his grip like a vice. "You're a feisty one," Gregor growled. Frank saw Ava in danger and roared with fury. He unleashed a flurry of attacks on Silas, forcing him to retreat. He then turned his attention to Gregor, delivering a devastating kick to his chest, sending him crashing into a stack of crates. Silas saw his opportunity and lunged at Frank with a hidden blade. Frank dodged the attack and grabbed Silas's arm, twisting it behind his back. He then delivered a final, crushing blow to Silas's jaw, knocking him unconscious. The fight was over. Frank and Ava stood side by side, victorious but battered and bruised. "It's not over," Ava said, her voice strained. "Silas has what he wants. The map." Frank frowned. "What does it lead to?" Ava explained that the celestial map wasn't just a map. It was a key, a cipher to unlock a hidden message embedded within a famous painting, The Starry Night by Vincent van Gogh. The collectors believed the message revealed the location of a legendary treasure, a priceless artifact lost for centuries. "Silas thinks he can decipher it," Ava said, "but he's missing a piece, a special lens that reveals the hidden message." Frank realized that the lens was likely hidden with the original painting, Autumn Mist, the one Ava had stolen. He knew he had to retrieve it before Silas could unlock the treasure's location. They raced to Silas's office, a lavishly decorated room filled with priceless artifacts. They found Silas unconscious on the floor, the celestial map clutched in his hand. They also found the Starry Night painting, carefully protected behind a glass case. Ava used her skills as an art thief to bypass the security system and open the case. She examined the painting, searching for the hidden lens. She finally found it concealed within the frame, a small, almost invisible piece of glass. With the lens in hand, Ava and Frank deciphered the message on the celestial map, revealing the location of the treasure. A hidden vault beneath the city's oldest cathedral. They had rescued each other and inadvertently uncovered a secret that had been hidden for centuries. Knowing the police would soon arrive, Frank and Ava knew they had to leave quickly. They slipped out of the warehouse, leaving the unconscious collectors behind. The warehouse was in chaos, alarms blaring, and fires raging. The collectors' organization, built on secrecy and brutality, was crumbling. They escaped in Frank's Audi, leaving the city behind. Frank drove to a secluded cabin in the mountains, a place he used as a safe house. They needed time to recover to plan their next move. They knew the collectors wouldn't give up easily. They would be hunted, but they were prepared. They had each other, and they had a secret that could change the world. At the cabin, they tended to their wounds and discussed their next steps. They decided to leave the treasure for now. It was too dangerous to pursue it, not with the collectors still after them. They agreed to disappear, to start new lives, far away from the world of art theft and ruthless organizations. Frank would return to his life as the transporter, but with a new purpose, to protect Ava. Ava, inspired by Frank's bravery and her own resourcefulness, decided to use her skills for good, helping to recover stolen artifacts and exposing corrupt art dealers. They knew their lives would never be the same, but they were together, and they were free. They had faced death and emerged victorious, their bond stronger than ever. The collectors were defeated, their organization in ruins, and Frank and Ava were ready to face whatever the future held. Epilogue. Months later, Frank was back on the road, transporting a mysterious package across Europe. He received a secure message on his phone, a photograph of a recovered stolen artifact, a priceless Egyptian amulet, with a note attached, "Thanks for the inspiration. A." Frank smiled. Ava was making a difference, using her skills to right the wrongs of the art world. He knew she was capable of great things. He arrived at his destination, a remote airfield in the Swiss Alps. As he unloaded the package, he saw a familiar figure approaching. Maria, the tech whiz, sporting a new hairstyle and a mischievous grin. "Frank," Maria said, "I've got a new job for you. A very interesting one. It involves a corrupt museum curator, a missing van,